All right, we're here. We're doing it. Welcome, everybody. Y'all, it's a nighttime party today. I'm excited for this. So, welcome to my room. If you haven't been in here before, it's an exciting place to be. I'm just checking in here to make sure that everything is working correctly. So, if you could do me a huge favor and in the comments below, let me know if you can see and hear everything. And then I want you to tell me two things in addition to that. As you come in, tell me first, what is one thing that happened today that was either really good or maybe something funny that one of your kids did? And then number two, tell me something annoying that one of your kids did, or maybe all of them. That would be great to hear. Thank you so much for being here. Y'all, I am blown away by how many responses we got for this question. So if you're just joining us and coming in here, here's what we got going on today. Today's class was supposed to be about the ways that you'll get stuck in your journey transitioning to proficiency or rolling along in your proficiency world language classroom, the things that really get hard, the moments where you'll kind of, as you're walking up that mountain, the parts where you'll trip, where your hiking boots give out on you, and how to lace your boots back up and keep going. And so what I did to prepare for class was I asked in a couple different places. I asked y'all in the group and on my email newsletter and on Instagram and Facebook, what are your sticking points? What feels hard about comprehensible input and teaching with proficiency oriented instruction? And the response was frankly overwhelming. I thought that it would be a very simple question, but what I observed is that this very simple question got a wide array of complex, varied, and very true gut-wrenching answers that I think many of you will also relate to as well. So here's what we're going to do. It's way too much content for one class. So I'm going to flesh this out into a little bit of a mini series. We're going to talk about today some of the ones that I saw first, and we're going to be doing a part 2 next week to answer even more because there's too much good stuff to not let any of it fly by us. Because this class, as you know, we set our intentions before each world language learning class. If you're new to this community, welcome. This is how we roll. When we are learning how to be better world language teachers together, something I always like to do is set our intention before class. And my intention for you, as you set yours, my intention for you is that when you look at what I'm about to show you, that you see that you're not alone, that this journey in switching to proficiency is what I've observed from successful people who make this transition is that it's actually not a complex one. It's very simple. It's simple shifts. It's simple mindset shifts. But that does not mean that it's easy. It's actually very difficult. And I think that you'll see that. And I hope that you do see that whatever struggle that you're going through right now with where you are in how far along you're going. Maybe you're just trying a few things here and there, which means that you're doing incredible. Maybe you're really in the meat of it. That's also incredible. Maybe it's really messy. I spent a whole year in that camp where it was just really messy and I didn't feel like I was good at anything. You're also still doing incredible. It's okay to be in any of those camps. I'm also really excited to hear that there are people in my community who have been teaching with proficiency for years, and then they still come to these classes in order to learn something, which I think is really cool. So y'all know who you are. Shout out to you if that's you. I'm excited to have you too. So as you come in, first, let me know what was something fun or funny that happened in your class today, and then also what was something annoying that one of your kids did, and set your intention. What you would like to get out of class today. My intention for you is that you see yourself in a lot of these people's stories. So without further ado, I'm going to share with you the first question, the first survey that I asked. And, you know, we're not going to do anything fancy with this. I'm just going to show you exactly what people said. The first question that I asked was, if you're in CI, what feels hard about it right now? And the second question that I asked is, I think where we're actually going to start today is, well, I want to use more proficiency oriented instruction, but ... And here's the but. And, you know, a lot of people feel guilty about that because sometimes what I've observed is that people beat themselves up about where they're at in their teaching journey. So I want to show you this so that you can understand how many people see the world the way that you do. All right, y'all, you're coming in. Thank you for being here. I'm so glad that you can watch this live, or if you're watching us in future vision on the replay, put a replay in the comments, and I'm so excited that you're here too. Let me see. I don't know if I can make this bigger for y'all. We're about to find out. Don't judge me for all my tabs, okay? I know you do it too, so don't even. But I'm going to be reading your comments here and make sure that I can see them all. You hear it twice. I see my comments a lot better on my phone. You do not want to even know all the ins and outs of this tech, trust me. So let's jump right into this. Okay, so for this version of the form was the one where I asked, ladies and gents, if you would like to use more proficiency oriented methods, you want to be a CI teacher, but you haven't made the leap yet. Why not? And here's what people said. So let's first just go through this and put in the comments below if there's anything in there that speaks to you. Maybe you wrote it. And here's how you're going to do it. Put in the comments, whether you're watching live or you're watching later. Y'all watching live, so excited to see you. If you see something that resonates with you, like give me one of those, like whichever one is your favorite, like the whoop whoop or the yes or the, I wish they had a snap emoji. I really do. Maybe that's just me, but I snap when I feel it. But here's what people said. These people are not currently teaching with a ton of CI proficiency. They're more in the traditional camp, but they say, I want to use more of these methods because, clap it up if this is you, I want more participation and interest. Me forever thirsty. You'll see me over here with my LaCroix. I believe it's better for the students. We'll improve writing. Oh, I want them to be able to think in the target language, not use Google Translate. Be able to use the language, not just memorize a bunch of rules and then forget. Let me speak to this one for a second here because I love this one. I'm going to turn the slide up a little bit. How do I look? Do I look ghostly? What else? As long as y'all can see me. Training's not about me. Anyways, this one, I really feel this one. I have a student that I'm going to call Tito by his Spanish name. When I was still teaching, I'm no longer in the classroom. I have the joy and privilege of supporting you full time behind the scenes. But when I was still in the classroom, I had a student named Tito that I taught for 2 years, high school. And that was his Spanish name. And I remember very vividly him coming back into my classroom. He used to come and visit all the time during lunch breaks and things like that. And he said to me, like dead in the eyes, one face, like, well, you know, you come to class, you learn all the Spanish words and you don't remember it at the end of it. It's fine. Like, you're still a good teacher. He looked me dead in the face and said that to me. And I knew that something was up. The idea that students could be okay with play the game, give my teacher what they want, and I can walk out of here not knowing anything, and it's fine. That's school. That's the school experience. And this was a very good student. I knew that there was something fundamentally wrong with what was going on in my classroom. If that's how one of my best students saw my class, and it was one of the major catalysts for my change. Maybe you've had an experience like that. So you, teacher who wrote this, saying that, I feel this one's so hard. I really do, because it's one of the reasons that I decided to make the very painful leap. I like this one too. I think it's the truth, but I'm not sure how to face it. I'm doing a little bit, but with a lot of uncertainty. Freaking good for you. You are royalty, king or queen, whatever you identify as. That's amazing, because doing something with a lot of uncertainty takes a lot of bravery. Improve my student speaking proficiency. I see the benefit. It seems more natural. I want my students to speak more. Students seem to like it, and it's important for language acquisition. Cool. I know it's best for my students. My mentor teacher had a lot of success with CI. I want my students to get the most out of their class time, and I've heard that it's good. So, full stop here. All of these teachers do not use this method or are starting to. They're not yet. There are things in their way, and maybe you are like that too. Do you feel that? Because you're not alone. Honestly, what I've observed in the years that I've been in the professional development space in world language is that the majority of people that I talk to in audiences and presentations, all that good stuff, about the idea of proficiency, feel the same way as you if you identify with these teachers, that this seems really cool. I think my students would resonate with this. It feels more natural. It feels more engaging. It's not really the idea that maybe you feel this way. I don't know. It's not really the idea of comprehensible input style methods that you have to be sold on. This is the part that gets sticky. I want to start, but proficiency is too daunting. New to me. Far of a reach. My curriculum is vocab heavy and forces student output before they are ready. Ooh, so real. Complicated, predominantly heritage speaker classes. They often have trouble understanding their own proficiency levels, either over or underestimating their own abilities. That's real. Difficulty managing student behaviors in the target language or in a CI method classroom. It's overwhelming to think about. Speaking of overwhelming, look at this. Can you see all this? Overwhelming. Abstract. I don't understand. Overwhelming. Confusing. Overwhelming. Too much to understand. If you are watching this and thinking to yourself that proficiency is daunting, is overwhelming, is abstract, is time consuming, you get a very large snap from me, because I spent a long time in that camp with you, a very long time. And something fundamentally different happened when, instead of looking at the various vehicles that you can provide comprehensible input, and I started focusing in on the purpose and the result. So what do I mean by that? You are absolutely right, and I completely get it, that proficiency feels very overwhelming, very abstract. It's confusing on how to start. It feels time consuming and daunting and all these things. And I would, oh my gosh, this is like 12 hours worth of material that I would love to dig into, But to keep the idea short, something that I've observed from successful teachers who use proficiency style methods is that they're more focused on the result than they are on the method of how they get there. What often happens when you're trying to figure out a new teaching perspective, which honestly, proficiency really is a new teaching perspective, right? But at its core, the whole idea of proficiency, this is what fundamentally shifted everything for me. So like eyes right here for this one. This is very important. What I noticed and what shifted everything for me is that proficiency is just the simple, beautifully profound, succinct idea that language is a skill, not a subject. Language is a skill, not a subject. So the focus of class is communication, and class is the communicative event. However you choose to do that, and however that happens in your classroom, it doesn't matter a flying fluke like how much or how little grammar you use, or what method you use to get there, or how you manage student behavior in the process. What matters is that instead of focusing on language features and attributes, you're focusing on what your students can do with the language. That's it. That's what proficiency is all about. But the reason that it often gets clouded and heavy and overwhelmed, and that I spent a year feeling the same way that you do, working until 7:30 at night sometimes, trying to figure it out, is because the road from here to there feels so zigzaggy and so daunting and so overwhelming. Because how do I go from all of these materials that seem to be focused on, and not even just materials, like let's not even go there. Let's talk about the fact that I don't really have let's not assume this was my experience. I don't really have any models for what to go off of what a proficiency oriented classroom looks like. I'm not really sure what that difference looks like in my grading and how that's going to play out when I talk to parents. No matter like how am I even going to get to the point of speaking in the target language all the time. But the truth of the matter is that that's, of course, the end goal in this extended metaphor that we're using, where you go from this profound shift of here, when you start out, or where most people start out, is in a traditional or a legacy style classroom. Class is about what students know about language and what they can tell you about language, and then occasionally some skills that they can use with language. The end goal of a proficiency-oriented classroom, however you choose to get there, many people choose CI because it's usually the easiest vehicle, is that with that in mind, communication becomes the goal of your classroom. So everything in your classroom uses, facilitates, and measures communication. It's very simple. It's just a profound shift. Now, I would say that there's also, like, this is a whole course. Like what you're talking about right here is the whole idea of comprehensible input being overwhelming is very true. A lot of people feel that, but that's a whole course. But I hope that by looking at this shift, you can see that there's so many different ways to get there. There's so many different pathways that you can take, but don't lose sight of the fact that you have everything in you, in your very powerful teaching. The fact that you are already here tells me that you're a good teacher, is just to develop the intuition to recognize in what you're doing. Is it going to get my students to know more about the language, or is it going to get them to know more skills to communicate? That's the difference. It's very simple. It is not easy, but it's simple. I hope that takes out some overwhelm for you. What do you think about that? Please let me know, because I hope that that helps. That was a fundamental shift for me, and I hope that that helps you as well. What does that also mean for you? What I see from a lot of these answers too is we have to teach for high stakes exams. it feels overwhelming to switch. There's so many information out there, where to start. It's time consuming. I have so much to do in my regular teaching and grading. So I want to give you another frame of mind. What are you spending your time on that's in your control? There's so much in teaching that's not in your control, right? There's so much that's not in your control. So much. When you're looking at a proficiency-oriented lesson, those lessons aren't really that much different from traditional lessons. They're just oriented towards a different goal. And you can, honestly, there are different types of people out there, but you can do different things. You can make them yourself. You can find them in various places, or you can get them like a whole thing, like a whole curriculum ready-made. And with all of those options, everything's going to be different and depend on who you are, where you're at in your teaching career, where you teach, and all these things, right? There's a lot of external factors in that, and I wouldn't assume anything about anybody. When I was making the switch, here's the situation that I was in. I had a few proficiency-based assessments to go off of, but the lessons were on me. So one of the things that I was spending the most time on was learning how to create lessons that were proficiency oriented. And I spent a very long time making them all myself, until I learned that there is a better way to do this that involves using that very important paradigm shift of understanding that this is either, it doesn't require any kind of fancy training to do this either. Like, it has nothing to do with that. This was me saying, I don't have the time or the money to go to any kind of CI training. I can only use what I have, right? I have very limited resources. So this is what I have. I was doing most of it myself. So what I would do is I would take a lesson that I already had, and I would try to shift the focus of that lesson using the same structure of it, maybe the same sentences, the same ideas, the same end goal, and shift the focus from instead being about the language features and demonstrating knowledge of the language features to communication and meaning, using the language features to be a vehicle for communication and meaning. This is the number one best time saving tip that I can give you, especially money saving tip, because, getting a giant curriculum or getting a training paid for you is not always an option, right? Especially not in the teaching world. That can be very hard. So I used to do this all the time, and you can do the same thing too, is take the lessons or whatever you already have in your back pocket that you're already using, something that might be a traditional, ser versus estar worksheet that you already have. And instead of making copies of it, look at it as, listen, I only have 20 minutes. I know this isn't a fabulous resource, but how can I shift this exercise from being about language features to use language features to create meaning? And that's where I slowly started my shift, because your shift is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not desirable, and it's certainly not sustainable. And after I started doing that, what happened was that the results that I got from just those small shifts in the resources that I already had and was already using were exponential from just those small shifts that I was making. So you know what I did? I went on this giant deep dive of trying to find like that's when I drank the Kool-Aid. When I started making that small shift of, I'm going to take the resources that I already have that are like, sorry, I was about to curse. It's late. It's a little late at night and I'm getting a little punchy, and I have a very foul mouth naturally, but that were a little poopy. They were not great. But they were what I had. And I love to create resources. I mean, hello, it's what I do now. So it was fun for me. And I would tweak them. I would make them, more proficiency oriented. We're like still going, you like my little hand gesture here? Is it working for you? Let me know, because I'm into it. But I would make that little shift from, okay, the objective of this lesson is about language features. Let's just like, doop, doop, doop. Let's just go more towards communication and see what happens. I didn't change anything else. I didn't change anything else about how much language I was using in the classroom. I didn't change anything about my communication style. I didn't change anything about my rapport or relationship with students. Nada. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I went on like that for like almost 2 years. And it worked so well that when the time was right for me, when I wasn't massively pregnant and I wasn't at a brand new school, and I was having so much trouble with discipline and relationship issues that it was so painful to be where I was at in my teaching career. And I already knew the possibility of what might happen if I shifted a little bit, that I was like, you know what? Let's freaking do it. Let's do it. I'm in. Let's drink the Kool-Aid. I am like all these other teachers up here who have heard all these cool things about CI. I believe that with just a little bit that I've tried in the proficiency oriented spectrum, that this will work. So now I'm going to add a little bit to my repertoire. It sounds very organized. It wasn't. It was a hot mess, because you know what I did? I was very overwhelmed. It was very time consuming. I didn't understand what I was doing. It was new to me. It was very far of a reach from my curriculum that was crazy vocab heavy and forced student output before they were ready. Absolutely. And it was very messy. But I started shoving into my lesson plans every day things that I bought on TPT, things that I made myself, lessons that I learned from La Loca, from other people that I've been in La Loca's program forever. So I followed her for a long time. And I went to a Bryce Hedstrom workshop, and then I interviewed Bryce Hedstrom. Many of you have seen that. And so I drank the Kool-Aid deep, like hardcore. Then I started blogging about it. And it was messy. It was super messy. It took me a really long time. I was staying at school real late, like almost every day. Point of the story being, though, is that it wasn't at all an overnight shift for me. It was something that I slowly did in bits and pieces. And you might be saying to yourself right now, like, well, yeah, that might have worked for you in the school that you were in, and maybe you were good at making resources or whatever you might be saying about that. But, well, and I guess I should say, and yeah, that might be true. What I've noticed, though, is that it's not really just me who tends to do it that way. In interviews with, if you are new around these parts, then you might be new to the idea of, I now host conferences for comprehensible input and proficiency oriented teachers. And clearly you've heard that I'm not an expert on this teaching method. I'm just very passionate about it and believe that there's a much simpler and practical way to do this. In those yearly conferences that many of you have been to, Practical and Comprehensible, I get the honor of talking to over 40 expert presenters on teaching with comprehensible input. And the common thread with all of those expert teachers with tons of years of experience, many of them been using these methods for many years, a lot of them built their proficiency in proficiency over lots of time. And the other common thread that they have that I would love to address this with is the difficulty managing student behaviors, is something that I noticed in my own classroom as well, is that even with just small shifts in this direction, you'll notice a dramatic increase in your engagement. Because you remember my student Tito from the beginning of class? If you're new to class, you might not have seen or heard this here, but one of the things that's new that we heard about from Tito was that it's easy to come into Spanish class, learn the vocab words, play the game, and then leave. But with this style of teaching, with proficiency-oriented instruction, the issues that happen with behavior, it's very common for other world language teachers, don't happen nearly as often for teachers who teach with comprehensible input. And the reason, the common thread between them, is that it's a community-oriented teaching style. So it eliminates a lot of that extra stress that you might be feeling right now. For me, I honestly switched out one large task for another when switching to this method. Before I started really getting serious about teaching with proficiency, I spent a great deal of time on the phone with parents, emailing stakeholders, and in conferences with students about behavior, about grades, and issues of that nature that were directly related to the style of teaching that I was using. And after I switched, even though it was hella messy, I went from having 35 referrals in 1 year to only having 2. I went from having a ton of parent emails and phone calls about worrisome grades and quarterly conferences to having very few because my grades skyrocketed. And it wasn't doing anything different with my grading system. It eliminated a lot of that type of work for me. So I hope that helps you with that piece. And let's look finally with this. Finally, and let me know too in the comments below if you're seeing any of these words here and you're like, ooh, I like that. Or maybe you put that here because I would love to know. I wish that CI and proficiency wasn't so stressful. That's real. I feel that. Daunting, challenging, real. Difficult to transition to or justify when my colleagues in the department all teach a more traditional way. Also very real. I actually have a whole video for you that I will link to in the chat below if you feel that way too, because that is real. The relationship with our colleagues is very important. That is not something to take lightly. And if we happen to be teaching in a way that's different from what they usually do, or maybe veering from the curriculum, sometimes that can be seen as detrimental for students. Like maybe they won't be prepared for the next level. That's something that I address in that video. So I'll get you that YouTube link because that's real. Oof, intimidating. I hope that that shift is helpful for you, that let's simplify the whole idea of what all this really means, and that you can take small, persistent action every day in the form of my favorite mantra, you know, and you love it, 2% better. The whole idea of switching to proficiency is honestly an oxymoron anyways, because you don't suddenly just teach for proficiency, right? It's works so much better if you slowly sneak your way in. Like many people describe it as a flip, and it can be, but you notice what happens if you do this all at once? You get nauseous, and so does everybody around you. An easier way to go is kind of like an airplane that's adjusting its course. So you slowly, 2%, little bit each week, making different adjustments. One of the ways that I did this, if you're looking for a specific example, is I started out, one of my huge pain points that I know a lot of you feel as well, is my number one pain point in my classroom was, how do I speak more target language in my classroom and not have my students hate me? How do I do that? So I was probably speaking about 40% in the target language in my level 1 French and Spanish classroom, maybe about 50 in level 2, because like, let's be honest, there's not that much of a difference between level 1 and level 2, especially if you teach block high school, or especially if you teach post-COVID, like they don't remember anything, right? They're basically the same. So what I did was I started using a timer and a counter to see if I could use more words. And then I forgot to use the timer, but I would incorporate more activities and note how often I spoke in the target language, like in full streams, in full sentences, and how often the students were using it too. And I bet you the highest that I probably got to after 2 more years of consciously doing that was about 60. It was so important to me that I started a whole series with other target language experts. Like little old me, I just got on my computer and said, hey, I have a blog. How do you use more target language in class? And I reached out to all these people that I knew were using 90 to 100% target language in their classrooms. It was like, can you come on video with me and show us how to do this? Like, welcome to my video series. It's on YouTube. You'll love it. You'll love it. So I know exactly what you mean. Ooh, let's talk about this one because this is great. Can you feel this one? Scary and stressful. I've tried several times and ended up giving up because of the group of students I've had for the past 2.5 years. Feel that? I had a class where they just were not into it. They just really were not into it. They were not into it. It was the only class that I've ever had that experience with. They were not into it. And so I see you for that. I absolutely see that. That is real. Where you have a class that just might not jibe with it. They need a different approach. They need a different approach, and they also need a reset. Try a reset. A reset is where there's no other way for it, but you have that, like, the talk, the meeting of like, this isn't working. How can we make this work? High schoolers appreciate honesty. I don't know what level you're in, but you can do this as a leader and still be in control of the classroom and be like, listen, this is not working. You're not happy. I'm not happy. Let's figure this out and see where things are. Students will give you an honest answer. One way that I've done a reset is have had students blind write on a sheet of paper what they liked about class and what was not working for them in class and what they wish they could change about class. 1, 2, 3. And they had to label it 1, 2, 3 and then turn it into the bin. The best feedback I've ever gotten about my teaching in my entire life. I really get this one too. I'm trying to find where it was earlier. Story-based. How many of you feel this? Somebody also said this in my Instagram as well, is I really wish that CI wasn't so story-based. And another person said, I wish I didn't have to be on all the time. That's very real. So something that I want to say to you about that is you don't. You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to do any of that. I didn't. I tried doing TPRS and I hated it. And like, let me tell you, I'm a theater person. Like, I just went to Rocky Horror last weekend, loved it. I was in musicals my whole life, love them. I am not a theatrical teacher though. I can't stand it. Can't stand it. And I also am not an English teacher. I love literature, but I don't like to teach it. So I completely understand where you're coming from that. You don't have to teach with stories. There's so many other ways that you can do this. I used to sometimes write little paragraphs for my students to read, but they were not elaborate stories. Start with what you know. And what you know is what you already have in your Google Drive or your filing cabinet. Pick a few. This is your action step. Since we're rolling around to the end of class here, this is your action step for everybody here. Check in with your intention for what you hoped to learn from class today. My hope for you is that you would see yourself in some of these responses today, that you would not feel alone if you feel like using proficiency is incredibly daunting, incredibly confusing, very overwhelming. I also hoped to share with you a little bit of my journey so that maybe you could see that somehow I'm an expert in this field now. I still don't know, but somehow I'm an expert in this field now. People come to me for advice all the time on this. But I was a great teacher, but I was no expert at comprehensible input. I was an expert at finding a strategy and a pathway to go from here to there. But I've never once attended a crazy all-encompassing 3-day workshop or like summer-long, all those things. And I have not been doing this for years and years and years. I just looked at the whole point of this teaching method and knew that if I made the shift from, and I know that you can do the same thing too, because this is what successful proficiency-oriented teachers do, which, by the way, is anybody who's trying to get there, even if you don't feel like you're there yet. You move from activities that are focused on language features, lessons and assessments that are focused on language features, to lessons, assessments, activities, and units that are focused on communication and measuring proficiency. That's it. And it's simple, but it is not easy. And it will take time to get there. And it does require a roadmap, and it does require a significant mindset shift. But what you can do before you get the roadmap is this one simple step. Take a look at the lesson that you are teaching tomorrow and ask yourself, how much of this is focused on language features? In what ways can I make it about communication? What am I teaching that is about language features? And in what small way, even if it's small, it counts, can I make it about communication? It could be as simple as deleting or crossing out the last activity and rewriting the instructions so that students have to formulate sentences on their own, maybe using some scaffolding that you provide them, instead of filling in some conjugated forms in a worksheet. That's still teaching for proficiency. It doesn't have to be a whole song and dance of reading a story together and then writing a free write and then acting it out together, Blaine Ray style. That's flippin' amazing. But that's like 5 years down the road for most people. You're in the seat. I would assume that if you are, I shouldn't assume anything, that maybe if you're feeling this way of like, Devin, I'm just trying to figure out how to teach tomorrow with, like a little bit less chaos. And I don't really have any new resources, and I don't have any way to go get any new resources. That's how you do it. Small, approachable shifts that slowly but surely make your class meaningful. And this ripple effect that you experience when your class is meaningful and your students are working for meaning instead of just their knowledge about language is so profound that you'll eventually be ready to make the leap. So I hope that this was helpful for you. It was such a joy to teach and hang out with you today. So let me tell you what's going on next week. Clearly, you can see that there is so much content in here. This is just one survey, and the next survey has double the answers in there. So what I'm going to do is look through and see what are the commonalities in the next group of teachers. The next group of teachers is especially exciting because it's the next phase in your journey. The next phase is where people are getting stuck. It is, I am teaching with comprehensible input methods, but it's hard. It's real sticky. And I don't know where to go from here. And CI feels like this. And I wish it weren't so this. And I wish I didn't have problems with this. Devin, help me with this. There's so many responses, and it would never fit in one class. So I'm going to go through all of the answers in there and give you the commonalities and the patterns with quick, actionable steps for you to move past them in next week's class. So what did you think? Was this helpful to you? Did it help bring a little bit of joy into your evening? Did you meet the intention that you had for class? I hope you did. And I cannot wait to see you for next week. And thank you so much for giving me these great responses, because now I know how to serve you better with this. It's a long haul. It's a long haul, but you're resilient. You got this. You totally got this. I know you do. And I believe that if we do it together, it might not go as fast, but we'll go a lot further. Ciao, y'all. Have a fabulous evening.